Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals. Today is Saturday, July the 9th, and today we're talking about fear and at least 5 things that we all have or have possibly had the fear of in the past. So I put these up here in no particular order, and there's also no real pattern to these things. Fear is fear. When we're consumed by fear, it kind of changes the way that we approach many things in our basic life. And so it really is truly a debilitating mental affliction that we need to address in a certain way. And by a certain way, what I mean is, first we need to recognize whether or not we have the spirit of fear. Now, without getting too much into spirituality, because I've had a lot of people tell me, especially recently, not to be preachy, I'd like to clarify that I'm not preaching. I'm just telling you from my own personal experience what I've encountered on my own journey. So if you feel like I'm preaching, that's one thing. If you understand that I'm telling you my own personal experience so that you can overcome these same obstacles, well, thank you so much. I know you've already subscribed. If you haven't, and you recognize that these things I'm telling you are from personal experience and you enjoy the way that I'm telling you this story, please go ahead and click on the thumbs up icon, I guess, and also be sure to subscribe. But more important than that, do me the favor of sharing any of the content that you find insightful, because there are other people with whom I am able to resonate. Now, I may not be your favorite choice of go-tos when it comes to this application, when it comes to YouTube and watching all these videos, but there's something I've said that has caused you to reflect on what I'm saying. And very recently, I had a very important conversation with a friend of mine who told me that some of what I'm saying may not be well received by a mutual friend of ours. And for that reason, the mutual friend may not be going out of their way to reciprocate or respond to whatever it is that I'm sharing. Usually what I'm sharing is insight about wildlife and nature and some of the things that we can do to better perceive what is going on. Because in order to resolve a problem, we need to be aware that there's a problem, right? So in order to be aware of something, we need to recognize that there's some kind of issue to begin with. And very recently, I shared a video showcasing during this drought that we're experiencing here in my hometown, how some raccoons pulled down a bird nest and how the bird nest was filled with a huge concentration of plastic and debris that the birds apparently found throughout the neighborhood to make their nest with. The good thing about that debris is that it practically will last forever. So that nest would have probably outlasted the birdhouse itself, which was made out of wood. But the bad thing is that these are indicators of things that are going on in our ecosystem. And so for our nature-loving friends, I shared this video hoping that it would bring together many of our friends to have a conversation. But for some reason, this conversation stops at a certain point, and we only use the news sources that come to our daily feeds in the format of whatever advertised platform that we choose to click on. So if you're not choosing to click on this video, for an example, there's no monetization that'll ever happen that says, hey, Ray, why don't you go and get yourself something nice and so you can record these things in a better format for the people you're presenting this to. If we're only going to the major media outlets or funding those people that are working tirelessly on basically cleaning up the oceans or what have you, if we're really only paying into that marketed campaign, we don't really know what we're paying for. Maybe we're not paying that person that's actually out there in the ocean trying to collect all that garbage, or walking on the beach and collecting all that trash, or walking through the local parks and showing you all of the trash that's there. Even the people who are going out of their way to pick up the trash themselves on those trails that they're finding on the trails. So these conversations that I try to bring to the forefront are not so much to damage the economy or the system that we have in place, so much as it is to reinforce the idea that even this very house that I'm standing in right now wasn't built by myself. I didn't have to do the hard work that it took to basically to use all these things that are here. With small exceptions, like this guitar I actually painted with a hand stain. I barely did any work to be able to use this beautiful item, but I did the work. And I've shaped the heads of certain guitars myself, and I've also recognized that maybe we can stop producing all of these guitars. Maybe we need to start refinishing certain items in ways that bring them back to use. There are so many things that are going into the garbage. There are so many things, for an example, that we're paying a bunch of donations to basically to receive all this marketing publication that's also going to go into the trash or into the recycling bin. And even then, is our recycling and or trash service really being tended to in a way that is sustainable? So many of the things that we need to consider are whether or not what we're paying for is actually bringing us peace. So if it's not bringing us peace, if it's not bringing us to a state of ease, the opposite of ease is dis-ease. So with a lot of what I'm talking about, you can see that I've repurposed a lot of energy that I've received from a lot of my local surroundings, just like the birds took the rubbish into their nests, just like I'm taking certain ingredients into myself, and just like I'm trying to showcase what purpose it has. The whole discussion that we're having is, well, how do we get past that? How do we get to the next part where we're not so afraid all the time of, let's just say, for an example, our biggest fears might be fear of losing friends. More than once, I've heard it from a friend that they don't want to talk to another friend about something that maybe the tertiary friend, the in-between friend, has discussed with one friend, because this friend and this friend might not completely agree on a subject or even disagree. We don't know, because we're afraid to talk among each other to figure out, hey, maybe we all three have similar ideas. We don't know. So we're afraid of talking with friends a certain way because we're afraid we might lose those friends. One of the ways to overcome that fear is to recognize that if we're not talking honestly with our friends, what do we have friends for to begin with? Second of all, if these friends are friends of ours and we have a difference of opinion, they probably will value hearing why it is we have this difference of opinion. It's not conceptual, it's not experimental, it's not theoretical. I'm telling you this because I have talked with all of my friends with what is on my heart, with what's going on in my life. And in many cases, that brings us immediately closer together. That doesn't mean that we've continued to be friends, because in some cases, the energy that I resonate is completely opposite from the energy that the other person resonates. And so oftentimes we'll find that I'm willing to have a conversation, so much so that here I am presenting this to you, to all of you, including the friends who would go so far as to click on dislike on this video. And I'm talking with you openly because this is how I feel. If there's something that someone feels completely oppositely about, they are more than welcome to discuss this with me, both publicly online here in the description in the comments area, and also in person if they're able to answer the phone or to call me to begin with and talk about something new. This is why, to me, it's okay to fear losing friends, because you don't really lose friends, you just lose those ongoing conversations that get you no further and get us no progress within this community that we live in. So the next thing I want to talk about is fear of losing family. This year and last year, for those of you who have followed my journey, know that I've lost personal family members, and they haven't even passed away. They've gone so far as to seem as if they've passed away, because I'm no longer able to communicate with them. Not because I'm not able to communicate with them, but because they themselves have done whatever it took to remove themselves from a conversation that should have happened and should still be happening right now. The thing about time is that time is not infinite in terms of the way that we experience it in these human shells. And so again, in order to reduce the amount of time that it takes to enjoy for each person to enjoy their lives, what we tend to do is to put ourselves into the situation where we can have the most comfort possible. Now, just because we think we're comfortable doesn't mean that everything is secure. So with all of that in mind, if I'm telling you that I have direct family members who will not speak with me, and family that's related to family who will not speak to me because of their own interpretation of what's happening, and because they will not discuss these topics with me fully, then maybe you can understand that, again, I'm not afraid of that. I'm actually grateful because I have a grateful attitude, grateful attitude for all of the things that I'm experiencing. And I understand that we're all on our own individual journeys. Like I said, I'm telling you about my journey. I'm not preaching to you. I'm just explaining that we should not have fear of losing friends or family. Really, it's the same thing. Just because someone's family doesn't mean that they're really our family. I heard this cat up the road saying, your vibe attracts your tribe. If you have a positive, high energy vibe, you're going to attract people who are positive and have a high energy. Now, there are some people who have negative energy who are going to be attracted to you because they know that you can achieve these things that are so insurmountable to most people, that are undoable for most people, that are considered brave by some people. And they are attracted to that because that kind of driven attitude is the kind of thing that accomplishes positive results. That's why, as some people out there would call it, that's why the chosen ones are oftentimes the centerpieces of their employers' divisions. Wherever they're employed, they're the ones who are getting the work done. They're the ones who are, if you're one of those people who are going in and you're knocking out all your work and other people around you are just kind of, they're going at a different pace. It's not because you're superior, you're motivated. Not everyone is motivated because they're not in a position for anything other than a salary and benefits. Which, just as a side note, I was looking up something today, and the word salt, Saul, is S-A-L, salt, S-A-L-T, but it's derived from a way where that's where the word salary came from. Worth your weight in salt. Worth your salt. These things are all tied together in a way called spelling. So if you're spelling things all the time, saying good morning, and not recognizing that morning can have dual purpose meanings, you might be going around kind of unaware that someone else has given you the means to communicate in a very hamstrung way. So that brings us to topic 3, fear of losing money. Most people are only in it, not to win it, but just for money and benefits. In fact, I recently went to a state park where I was fully aware of the venomous snakes that were in that state park, but the employees who worked there for quite some time were unaware that a certain type of venomous snake lived in their area, that's where some people would go to see this specific venomous snake. I'm not saying we should all be, what's the word, herpetologists or ornithologists or any kind of ologists in the area that we work at. However, if our life and our livelihood is dedicated to a wild and wilderness experience, perhaps we need to know these details, because that's the kind of thing that we're working at. If we have joy for the place that we're working at, if we have some kind of a positive energy, a great attitude, if we're grateful for the place we're working at, we're going to research it, know what we're working with, and help other people who are visiting to become familiar with that area. So the fear of losing money, usually people are holding on to things for so long because of a fear that it's going to run out. And once you start to turn that tap off and go, I'm unafraid. I am totally unafraid of whether or not I'm going to be paid for the work I'm doing. I'm totally unafraid of that. The only thing I want to do is to bring joy to the people for whom I'm working. When we do things like that, that doesn't mean people will stop taking advantage of you and will start saying thank you for the work that you're doing for them. I'll tell you from personal experience, people have tapped me to do work for them that I'm not in charge of, that I'm not even paid for, and they won't even tell me thank you after I've done the job. There's people whose systems I fixed that won't even acknowledge that I fixed them. There's people whose photos I've taken and put up in their hotel rooms, they won't even acknowledge that I did the work because they don't want to give credit where credit is due. Well, I don't necessarily operate just on credit. I take cash as well. You can click on the description and find out how to contribute yourself if you would like to contribute to this journey that I'm on, which is basically sharing wellness and conservation and topics about wildlife and nature. And I would appreciate it. In the meantime, I'm not really afraid of losing money. If you really look at all of the things that I've shown you on this channel, I'm living a wealthy lifestyle, whether I make an income on paper or not. The things that are being brought to me are just things. They're temporary resources, just like this body that I'm using to present my voice to you in a way that's uplifting. If you don't find it uplifting and you find it something that's off-putting, if it's terrible that I dug a tree down so deep that it basically was able to have a better chance of living, and if you want to say that I'm seeking Satan by digging these holes in the ground to plant life and to nurture it, well, you can say that. It's your right. We live in this country where we have the freedom of speech. Since we have the freedom of speech, I wonder how come so many people are afraid of using their voice. Maybe it's because they're afraid of losing their income, of losing their friends, of losing their family. These are all possibilities, but I'm telling you, fear is the thing that is basically shortcutting many of our conversations. So if it's all about money, let me tell you, some of the most brave people have even led the nation for just simply being honest about what they want to speak, whether it's something that's uplifting or not. It's a true story though. All you have to do is check the record. So that brings us to the next thing. Fear of losing our reputations. Our reputations are what define us, supposedly. But what of the fruit on the vines? What of the fruit of what it is we're cultivating? If someone gives me something to build or to improve, do I do that? If someone loans me something, do I loan it back in the same or better condition? Or do I give it back in a broken condition? What we are there to tend to, let's just say we're there to tend to a resort. And if we're there to tend to the resort, and if all of the things around us are falling apart, are we really putting our energy into getting that place in order? Or are we delegating that job to someone else? If we have our own house, do we do our own yards? Or we can't, for whatever reason, do our own lawn because the place is so big that we have to employ someone else to do it. Our households are the things that we should be stewards of. And some of the things that we are tending to, we're not really tending to them. And I understand that this is a necessary challenge because let's say I have a vehicle. I don't know how to do all the work to that vehicle, but I do know that it's necessary to maintain that vehicle. If the tires are going bad, I need to switch them out. I once had someone that I knew who would only buy one tire even if all of them were bad, but one tire was the one that was leaking air. If all the tires are bad and you can only afford to get one tire, you're living in a state of poverty because inevitably one of the other tires is going to go bad. And typically, especially here in town, you can buy 3, get 1 free. You know, the thing about maintaining something as a whole is that it's more effective to have something that's working. If you have a dull knife, what have you heard from chefs? If you have a dull knife, you're more likely to cut your own fingers because it's not operating the way it should. The same thing goes for having instruments that are out of tune. The same thing goes for having instruments that are out of tune. I'm pointing to myself because I'm telling you, there's basically a direct correlation to whether we are able to tend to what is in our own control. So our own selves and our own reputation are the things that are coming from how we tend to ourselves. The reputation of tending to ourselves is basically what we're building. So as you're watching this, as you're seeing this right now, know that you're going to see in the next few videos a whole different version of myself, because I'm tending to myself after having shut off all of the unnecessary conversations that are happening, because I am not afraid to push those conversations out and put them in a place where they need to be aired, maybe publicly. These conversations that I'm having might need to be escalated. Just like if we're at work and we're requesting something from another department and they're not giving us the answers that we need, and so all of the work stream is on hold, sometimes we need to escalate to management. In this particular case, you are like management. So everything that you're hearing and that you're understanding has to do with the journey of reputation, health, wellness, and conservation. Thank you again so much for watching and for subscribing. I hope that you're clicking on the thumbs up because some of this is resonating with you. I hope you've considered sharing this. I hope that you've understood that just because some of this might apply doesn't mean that you cannot overcome that fear. And I'll show you how to do it based on examples in this series so that you yourself can bypass the slow lane in terms of achieving and accomplishing what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Don't be afraid. Be grateful. Have a grateful attitude, and you'll easily be able to accomplish anything you want. One time I told someone I was trying to write songs, mostly so that I could potentially turn that into an income stream and talk about this wellness and conservation situation so that we could contribute a whole lot of money into restoring nature as quickly as possible. They told me this was impossible. They told me that it was not likely that I would ever be able to do something like that. And I told them that they needed to take that comment back, because what they were trying to do was discourage me. And if they're my friend, what they really should be doing is trying to find a way to help encourage that process that I'm trying to showcase right here and elsewhere. Like I said before, and especially if you watch some of my former segments, you've seen people have tried to cover up my work that I should be getting credit for. Why is that? I don't know. I can't explain it, but part of my reputation has been covered up. Some of it right here has been aired as freely as possible for as long as this channel allows me to showcase what I have to say about what's going on in my life on this YouTube, which again, I'm talking about my story, YouTube channel, where I call it the Jeep Journals, because a lot of this enlightenment happened while I was on the road traveling the nation, looking at the wildfire destruction on the West Coast, looking at all the national parks and the decline in wildlife and the struggles of all of nature, and not just looking at it, sharing the challenge with everyone here. So I'm not really afraid of my reputation. What I'm afraid for is that nature is going unnoticed and it has no voice for itself. This is its voice. If you are not speaking for nature on your own channel and you love nature, well, we're missing a voice from the conversation. But if you click on the comments and add some comments in favor of these videos and help to drive these in the direction that they're growing, then perhaps we can nurture things together. So I hope you're clicking on the description. I hope you're clicking on the comments. I hope you're clicking on the thumbs up. I don't mind if you're clicking on the thumbs down. Haters make you greater. Hate on, baby. So that brings us to the number 5 point that I wanted to make, which is some of us have fear of losing self-control. Again, not getting into the aspect of thumping the Bible. There are tales in that one of the main bestsellers of books that talks about peace, of having a spirit of truth and having a spirit of error. Many times as you're watching these videos, you can see that even I will make errors in the things that I'm saying. However, some of those errors are not quite errors. When you hear the things and see the gestures that are occurring, you'll understand I am just like anybody else out there, faced with the same dilemmas and the same consequences. The only difference is that I'll be judged differently from, let's say, a child or a person from another nation or a person of another gender or a person of another ethnicity. The fear of losing self-control is really basically a which side are you feeding type story. Are you feeding the wolf? You know, which wolf are you feeding, I should say. There's like a wolf of goodness and a wolf of atrocity. Which wolf are we feeding? Which error are we most likely to make? Are we going to be stronger on the side of positivity and uplifting one another? Or are we going to be stronger on the side of cowardice and not ever intervening when it comes to tending to our flock? Even the wolves have to tend the flock a certain way. Otherwise, the flock runs very thin and starts to become fully diseased, and basically this causes the ultimate demise of the entire congregation, so to speak. Again, I'm not Bible thumping. I'm using analogies, parables. There was another peacemaker or two that talked in these ways. They had to use examples because that's the most powerful way to help someone to see that we are either helping one another or we are basically remaining silent and allowing a nation to fall apart, possibly wearing identifying marks and being identified a certain way. This has happened in the past of the eras that we are aware of in this form of history. It's not to even touch on any of the histories that have disappeared without a trace before us. All of these things are just basically helping you to understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully you're understanding that all I'm doing is basically sharing my experience on this channel. I'm not preaching, but I am practicing what I'm talking about. I'm doing it as best as I can, trying to make as few errors as I can while telling you exactly what's going on in my circumstances. And if you don't like it, that's fine. If you disagree with it, that's fine. If you think I'm digging my way to somewhere else, that's fine. Please continue to add that insight into the comments. Please be kind when you're responding back and forth with one another. Know that if there's an argument that's happening, I will do my best to at least point the conversations in a rational way to where we can understand the being that we're speaking with is also just like us, seeking insight, because some of the comfort that we're going to receive is not going to be in the form of bread. Man does not live on bread alone. We are extremely hungry at this point. We're looking for knowledge. We're seeking knowledge. And this knowledge is brought to you courtesy of having a great attitude. Until next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. And I look forward to seeing you in the chat session below.